Go ahead and call to order the Historic Preservation Board meeting for May 3rd, 2022. First item up would be roll call. Ms. Kaufman?
Daniel Courtney. Bill Lee. Elizabeth Hawk. Here.
Michelle Hazen, Michael Hill, Rachel Iannelli,
Here.
Dr. Kamal,
Here.
Jay Reeves,
Here.
Bill Warner,
Here.
Bridget Murphy.
Here.
You have quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next item up would be approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? No one? Okay. Okay, that brings us next to public comment. This would be for an item that's not already on the agenda. Please state your name and address. I guess, address, yeah.
Hi, I'm Tana Silva, and I was going to mention an item that was on the agenda for the City Commission meeting on Thursday that you probably all have heard about. Is the Historic Home Stabilization Initiative that the GCRA has put together, but about an hour and a half ago they took it off the agenda for some reason. So it's only $77,000. I think this whole initiative started 6 years ago. We were working hard on stemming demolition by neglect, starting with this board, and got up to, reports and city activism in it and all of that, and then boom, a new city manager came on board, and they got rid of the standing committees, and with it, the whole demolition by neglect issue went away, and it's only just now starting to come back. And so anyway, I was going to ask if you, I don't know, as individuals, if you can advocate things to the City Commission, but as a group or as individuals to advocate for really, stepping up that program when it does come back around. And but now also I want to ask if you will advocate to the City Commission to not demolish the old fire station and Thelma Bolton Center. There's no need. The consultant even said that it would be more beneficial and less costly to renovate the old fire station. It's the coolest building. I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it is just awesome, mid-century modern. It could be so many good things, and the City Commission doesn't seem to understand the cost of demolition environmentally, particularly. It's tragic. Economically, culturally, certainly, in historical terms and all of that, but it's just sad. And their only idea is just to replace it with another one of these horrible 6-story apartment buildings with empty, retail space on the bottom. It's so terrible. And we don't need more rentals anyway. We need more, homeowners here. So those are two things that, if you can, as individuals, as a board, if you can advocate strongly. Cynthia Chestnut asked, is this going to come to the Historic Preservation Board? Is this going to come to the Duck Pond neighborhood about Thelma Bolton? And Thelma Bolton history is just so awesome. So, my 3 minutes are up. Anyway, if you could lead the City Commission to be a leader in renovation, it brings more jobs. It's better all the way around instead of demolition. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
May I get your first name again?
It's Tana, T-A-N-A, Silva, S-I-L-V-A.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay.
Good evening, board. So Elizabeth Waite, I do go by Betsy. So I'm here to provide an update on the Thelma Bolton discussion that took place just a couple of weeks ago on the 14th at the General Policy Committee meeting. So I represent Wild Spaces and Public Places, which is a project management office housed within Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs, just for kind of high-level overview of who I am and why I'm speaking today. So on April 14th, I took a discussion item to the General Policy Committee under direction of the city manager, and we provided an update to that group on the status of the Thelma Bolton Center. And this was a good caveat by Tana coming in. So some of you may know, so the Wild Spaces team, we began working on a comprehensive renovation project for the Thelma Bolton Center really just a couple years ago. So in late 2019 is where we started that design process. So we brought to the Historic Preservation Board, and just in the spring of 2021, our 60% design plan set, which was reviewed, and we received a certificate of appropriateness from this group on May 4th. And this was for a comprehensive renovation, a small addition, and a new entry to the building. So fast forward a handful of months. So this past fall, so November of 2021, we received a report from a structural engineering firm who would assess to the partial collapse of the roof. And so if you have not walked by the Thelma Bolton Center, it's just a couple blocks away. I highly recommend checking it out. It is quite obvious the amount of just the change in the building that's taken place recently. So the report was not good. So the walls are hollow. The foundation of the building was undersized, so it does not meet any type of modern building design standards. The timber that was used in the 1940s, it is known to be prone to shrinking in the hot environment that it is in, which causes cracking. And the building was constructed in a low area, so the erosion over the past 80 years has really just exacerbated all of these fundamental issues. So on April 14th, the General Policy Committee, they gave us permission to start working with the design team on a new Thelma Bolton Center. I definitely understand that is out of order with what kind of the typical process is. And so we are going to be coming back to you in the next couple months for a preliminary hearing and really just working hand in hand with you to make sure we're going to do the right thing for the Thelma Bolton Center. Let's see what else. So we're not going to do anything before we have a certificate of appropriateness, but just wanted to give you an update in case anyone had tuned in or had watched the recorded General Policy Committee meeting, just the kind of like where we're at, where we're going, and that we will be in conversations with this group in the coming months. I'm available for questions if you have any, but I don't want to take too much of your time.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wood.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions at this time? It will be coming for us when they're ready. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, Melanie Barr. Is there a way I can show some pictures? Is there somebody that can?
Yeah, just put it on the table right there and they'll project it up, yeah.
So when the city commission voted to be on the path to demolish, I don't think they took into consideration the unique history of this building. It's not only 80 years old, so of course it does have some problems, but it was a building that was built in Gainesville strictly for the World War II soldiers to come and recreate, meet local girls, dance, write letters, and have fun before they went back to Camp Landing and off to Europe or wherever, and some didn't come back. Now, I do know two different people whose uncle actually attended this events here, so we can get people who will certify as to how much it means to them. It also means a lot as representing Thelma Bolton. She was a hostess here, and then after World War II ended, she was in charge of the rec center and teen time, and the bands that played on that stage were Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. Stephen Stills, Don Fedler, Bernie Ledden on that stage. Tom Petty attended those dances. Significance through that. This significance through Thelma Bolton herself. She never married or had children, so this is her namesake. She was known around the state of Florida as a cousin Thelma and the queen of Florida folk culture. So this represents her, where she hung out, operated it, and great significance. Also, the contra dancers love this building. They come from all over the nation to dance here. So it has significance to people now and should not be demolished. In the city's strategic plan, it talks about more sustainable. Well, tearing down a building and having to go to the dump is not sustainable. The best-in-class upgrade city facilities. It says maintain and upgrade city facilities. So I want to know, when were the termites spotted, and was this ever tented? I don't remember being tented.
Okay, well, keep in mind, this hasn't really come before.
I know,
us, so we're
okay,
not
so
gonna
I'm giving you
question
some
all that
examples.
At this point.
Now, they say, oh, it's too far gone, it can't be saved. Well, here's an example of a building that was saved. Here's another one. Here's a wall. I know people are saying, oh, the walls are poorly built and all that. Well, this is not a good wall either. This is a ceiling. And then the final, the renovation, this is what it looks like in the end.
Yeah.
And then I do want to show you a picture of a building that was restored. That was restored. So people are saying, oh, it's a wreck and all. It doesn't look like that other building at all. It certainly doesn't look like this. They were restored. And if they're allocating $3 million to build a new building, they can spend $3 million renovating a landmark. And on the state historic marker, it says Florida Heritage Site. So we don't want to tear that down. And I want to pay homage to Mark and Mary Butler, Mary Barrow. And if you read the paper today, you saw the article about Mary Barrow, and without her, downtown wouldn't look the way it is. It talks about they restored 21 buildings, and I think they need to be recognized for that. And he says how he got interested in historic preservation. His friends bought a house. Who read this in the paper today? Anyhow, it says the house was leaning 6 inches. Now, most structural engineers would say bulldoze it. He said, Mary and I said, those people are nuts. That thing's going to fall down. When they revisited the property 2 years later, it had been restored magnificently. And thanks to that renovation, the Barrows started working here and saved, as I said, 21 buildings. So anything's possible. All it takes is money. And if they have $3 million to build a new building, which we don't want, we're in a historic district, it's residential, we don't want a bigger building, we don't want a building on a concrete floor, we want our Thelma Bolton.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Pagan. Several years ago, I joined a national research effort known as the Living New Deal. It started at the University of California, Berkeley. My master's thesis at UF was regarding the Civilian Conservation Corps. But this project, which you can find online, www.livingnewdeal.org, has been documenting structures and projects of the New Deal, which was during Franklin Roosevelt's administration, 1933 to 1942. The Gainesville Servicemen's Center, also known as the Thelma Bolton Center, is documented on this site. The map on the website will show almost 17,000 projects nationally. 209 are in Florida. At this time, 8 in Gainesville are documented. I know there's at least one more I need to add. Thelma Bolton Center is one of 456 that are shown as still existing. So that gives you an idea of the loss of this historical period. I moved back to Gainesville in 2000 from New Orleans. Following Katrina, I phoned some friends there. They're physicists, Polish nationals, and Ursula said to me, we're going to take our daughter to see the damage. We want her to see the force and power of water. Unfortunately, it's not just high category storms that have that force, but if a building has a leak, it's every rain. And my training in July of 2020 during the pandemic with the Climate Reality Project has reinforced that the storms are getting more intense. Our typical afternoon storm is more intense, and until we address the climate problem, that's only going to worsen. Building reuse has already been mentioned. It's very important to maintain existing buildings. The greenest building, as you know, is the one that already stands. And anyone can add projects to the www.livingnewdeal.website if you know of a project. Unfortunately, the site was hacked a few years ago, and it's taken some time to rebuild. I recently requested an edit to the school site that is now the Carolyn Beatrice Parker School. That has not been done yet, but It's an entirely volunteer effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay. That brings us to the public hearing portion of the meeting. Scott?
If you're planning to speak on any of the public hearing items, can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give here in front of this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. Requests for deferrals, any?
I haven't heard of any, Mr. Chair.
All right. Continued items? None? New items?
Okay, thank you. This is agenda item, this is public hearing 1, petition HP 21-00134. It's a certificate of appropriateness for demolition and new construction. The address is 221 Northwest 4th Place. This is a contributing structure in the Pleasant Street Historic District. We have 2 dates of construction. The Alachua County Property Appraiser says 1930. We have the Florida Master Site File Survey that says 1928, so we can be fairly certain it's around those dates. This property is a simple wood frame vernacular shotgun style home amidst a row of similar historic homes on a narrow tree-lined street. All of the properties on that block, with the exception of one small auxiliary building, are contributing structures in the historic district. The long, narrow building features a front-facing gable-on-gable roof. The siding is horizontal clapboard with vertical venting strips in the gable eave. Narrow wood floor front porch is supported by 4 simple square wood posts, and the whole house appears to be set on concrete block foundation piers. Does not appear that any of the original windows, or any windows at all for that matter, still remain in the house. The house is pretty beat up and boarded up, but we do know that the original windows were 2/2 double hung sash when this property was surveyed more than 25 years ago. So this project is proposing to demolish this structure and replace it with a new 2-story single-family home. That 2-story new home is proposed to be of a wood frame house with a front-facing gable, and the materials include shingle roof, the pine shiplap horizontal siding, and a full-width front porch supported by simple but elegant piers. Windows are 2/2 single-hung sash, and the rear of the house also features a porch. There is no separate garage proposed. Is that correct, Andy? There was no garage? The home will have 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, with a total square footage of 1,567 square feet. So, as you know from our previous cases, talking about Pleasant Street, we know what the house forms and styles are in that district. It's representative of many American communities that were affected by the rapid rate of growth during the nation's railroad boom, 1850 to 1890s period. And the majority of the historic residences in this district are wood frame vernacular structures that reflect 6 distinctive varieties of house shapes. Gable front and wing, hall and parlor, I-house, side gable, and pyramidal. The district also contains a number of bungalows and residences reflecting the Queen Anne and colonial revival traditions. So, in Pleasant Street, in your historic preservation ordinance, you have special criteria when you're reviewing a demolition request. Pleasant Street is the one district that even has its own special demolition criteria as a subset under that. So I have reiterated that language in your staff report. The Pleasant Street Historic District criteria is different from the regular criteria that the board must use when considering demolitions. This is because Pleasant Street has seen more demolitions and new construction infill that eroded the historic building stock more than any other historic neighborhood. Rising property values were overriding the ability for small vernacular structures to be preserved, and a significant Gainesville African American neighborhood was, and still is, at risk for total loss. So a decision by the Preservation Board to approve a COA for demolition must be guided by the following criteria. I won't read every single word of the 3 criteria for you. That's from your preservation ordinance, but I will just kind of outline the 3 main things. You have to look at the significance of the property, the plans for redevelopment, and the condition of the building. So in my subsequent assessment of these 3 criteria for demolition, you will see that under A, the significance of the property, this street, Northwest 4th Place, is specifically called out in subparagraph 1. The property is located on an important street and within a cluster of historic buildings. So it is called out there. So we know that this is one of the really significant properties in the historic district. Plans for redevelopment. This application does provide definitive plans for redevelopment, which is good because we don't want to be approving demolitions and then nothing happens to the site. That's the worst. Like you've allowed a historic structure to be demolished and then it sits vacant with no plans. However, the evaluation of the proposed reuse of the property must consider what effect those plans will have on the surrounding area. The 2-story structure is out of character for this street and block and would negatively impact the small-scale 1-story rhythm that currently exists. And then the last criteria you have to consider is that condition of the building. So the structural integrity of this building has been completely compromised, and that is not the current owner's fault. He bought this property in this condition. The building is not weather tight. It is in danger of collapsing onto itself. There is not even anything left in the interior. And in the engineer's report that was sent to you with the staff report, there's plenty of photographs of the inside. I would have taken some, but it was a little bit too dangerous to go inside. I didn't reprint the engineer's report for you here, but I did bring 1 copy in case you want to look at it and pass it down. The economic feasibility of restoration of existing materials would be hard to attain, since literally everything on this structure would have to be reconstructed and replaced, and to new building code requirements. Then we have, on top of that, with the new construction proposal, we have our famous 12, I almost said 12 steps. It's not 12 steps. It's the 12 criteria used to evaluate the compatibility of new construction in a historic district. And the 12 criteria are, number 1, rhythm of the street. The proposed structure does feature a full-width front porch. However, the size and height of the structure will create a discernible and visual difference from the adjoining historic structures that does not complement the patterns and rhythm of this street. I also, later on, I provided you quite a few context photos of this street and the residences on this street. Number 2 is setbacks. So in Pleasant Street, the setbacks can vary considerably. The zoning for this parcel requires 10-foot front setback, 20-foot rear, and 5-foot side setbacks. This project complies with that. The 3rd criteria is height. The overall height of the building and structures related to those sharing the same street or block. In those parts of Pleasant Street that have not been subject to rapid redevelopment, the buildings are primarily single-story. This proposed new structure is 2 stories in height. All of the structures around this property are 1 story in height, with the exception of a 2-story structure that's 3 houses away. The massing and height of the proposed building is far greater than those in the immediate vicinity. And I will tell you that the 2-story building that is on the same block, a few houses away, has a 430 square foot footprint. So it is just over 800 square feet building. So it's 2-story, but it does not take up the entire lot. Number 4 is roof forms. In this district, the primary roof forms are either side or front gables with V-crimp metal or asphalt shingles. The material proposed for this project is fiberglass shingle, and the front-facing gable with vented eaves is consistent with the roofing styles found throughout the district. Number 5, rhythm of entrances and porches. In the Pleasant Street District, porches are strongly encouraged and should have sufficient size to accommodate outdoor furniture and easy accessibility. Their widths and depths should reflect that which can be found on other historic buildings in the district. The proposed new structure provides a full-width front porch with appropriately designed post supports. And I say appropriately designed because they're not overly fancy, and that's totally appropriate for this district. Number 6 is walls of continuity. In this particular district, the streetscape features are minimal, such as formal sidewalks, concrete curbing. There are very few fence-lined properties and virtually no walls. This project does not propose any fencing or walls along the street. So for number 6, this project complies. Number 7 is the scale of the building. On this street, which has been determined as a significant street within the district, the building scale is relatively small, with 1-story residences, low-pitched roofs, proportional bays and openings, and details that reflect the modest character of the neighborhood. The proposed new structure does have good proportions of openings on the front facade, less so on the side facades, but the proposed structure is significantly bigger in scale than the typical building on this block in terms of the massing and configuration. Number 8 is directional expression. Within the vicinity of the subject property, there are many single rectangular forms which are more horizontal in expression, such as the bungalows. There are also some gable end forms more vertical in expression. Now, this is a front-facing gable, and it's a 2-story, so it's clearly a vertically expressed building. That part is appropriate. Proportion of the front facade is number 9, and this talks about the height to width ratios, which establish a pattern of proportions that you see from building to building. This building that is proposed is an appropriate width, but the height is not in scale with the adjacent structures, or the structures across the street, or in scale with the majority of the buildings on the entire block. 10 is proportion of openings. On the primary facade, the width and height relationship of the windows and doors are compatible compared to the opening proportions of other buildings in visual proximity. Number 11 is rhythms of solids to voids. And the pattern and overall composition of the openings on the main facade, they are compatible with the adjacent historic buildings. The amount of space that the windows take up within the front facade are in an appropriate ratio. Number 12, and the final one, is the details and materials. This proposed project is utilizing shingles for the roof, a horizontal plank siding, a full-width front porch, multi-light sashed windows. All materials that relate to the these are all materials that relate to the existing historic neighborhood context. So those were our own city criteria for new construction in historic districts. Then you still have, on top of that, you have the federal standards, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And for this particular case, standards 2 and 9 apply. Standard 2 is that the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. While there may be justification for this demolition, if we're using this strict standard on its own language, this is definitely, a demolition is a total loss of historic materials, features, and spaces that currently characterize the property. As standard 9 is for new construction. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property, and new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of that property and its environment. The proposed new construction, I think, is successful in exhibiting common architectural features found elsewhere in the district. But it's clear that the massing and scale, especially the height of the structure, is out of character compared to the adjacent historic buildings along this street. Okay, thank you. Now, the evaluation, staff's evaluation, based on my review of the property on site and based on my review of the new engineering report, there's sufficient evidence to suggest that the demolition of the property is appropriate in terms of what historic materials even remain and the economic feasibility of forcing the owner to do such a rehabilitation. However, this particular property is situated on an identified, important, and significant street within the district and sits within a cluster of historic buildings. Therefore, the proposed replacement structure design is of the utmost importance in the consideration of this demolition request. The proposed building fails to meet 4 of the compatibility criteria for new construction within a historic district and does not meet the 2 key federal standards that apply for this demolition request. Staff recommends, I just wanted to see one thing. Okay, in my staff report, I had put that they were 2/2 windows, but they're designed as 1/1. I was thinking about what I wanted it to be, but they're 1/1, and I have it correct in the recommendation, but I just wanted to point that out to you. So staff recommends that the application HP 21-00134 for the demolition of 221 Northwest 4th Place and the subsequent new construction be approved with the following 3 conditions. Condition 1, the vernacular architectural vocabulary of the new project shall be retained as designed, but shall be reconfigured to be a 1-story residence. Condition 2, and that does not mean, I'm not suggesting they can't move further back into the lot too. If they want to move further back into the lot, I think they have the room to do so. Condition 2, the gable eave vent that's currently designed shall be changed to the vertical slat configuration found on the existing historic building as a way to pay homage to that lost historic structure. Condition 3, the windows shall be designed as 2/2 single hung sash as a way to pay homage to the lost historic structure, since that was the original configuration according to the Florida Master Site File form and survey. And actually, the original windows would have been double hung sash. Very few people use double hung sash anymore. That's where the upper window can move down and the lower sash can move up. Both of them move. But as long as the window configuration is 2/2, I'm okay with single hung sash. Your exhibits include the map of the property, the contextual photographs, the actual COA application with the engineer's report, and the Florida Master Site File.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kaplan, are you representing the applicant?
Yes. Mr. Kaplan, the architect. I would like to point out just a couple of things. There is a 2-story house, a couple of houses down from this one, and on the corner immediately, a couple more houses to the west, there are new 2-story houses being built that I assume you all have approved. And a couple of lots south of that, there are more 2-story houses being built. So I don't think the house is that out of place. I don't mind the small changes that were recommended. I made 1/1 windows just in an attempt to keep the building as simple as possible because that's the genre of the neighborhood. I don't mind making those changes. The issue is the 2 stories. The house was made 2 stories, because the lot doesn't provide enough space to make a one-story house. It's a tiny lot. I don't remember the exact dimensions. Is it 35 by 63 or something
I think
like
it's
that?
100 by 31.
31 by 100, okay. So that doesn't leave very much buildable area. And if we want to have a porch on that house on the front and maybe one on the back, you end up with a very small house that will end up being a rental for college students, most likely. What the owner wants is to build a house for a family. And so we were trying to build a 3-bedroom home. I have a picture. I'm afraid it's not a very good picture, but I just want to, if that can be picked up. I think you can see that I have to differ with Ms. Kaufman, who said the siding was horizontal. As you can see, the siding is curved as the back of the building is collapsing under its own weight. I've never seen curved siding before, but I'm surprised it hasn't popped off of there. So those are my comments. The only big question is being able to make this house one story and still have a real home.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, may I clarify something?
you may.
So the 2-story building a few houses down, I already alluded to, and it's a very small footprint 2-story building. The brand new 3 2-story buildings he is referring to is the next block over, and they're the ones behind Old Mount Carmel Baptist Church. If you have been there physically, you can definitely see there's a change in context and a change in character from that side of the street to this side of the street. This side of the street is heavily canopied. It's a narrow street, almost like an alleyway. And these are very distinguishable 1-story wood frames all in a row, all down the street. In your staff report, I also created maps for you that show how many buildings on the block are 1-story and how many are 2-story. You also have a map. I'm sorry, I think it came out kind of light but the greens are the contributing and the blue is non-contributing. That entire block is every single structure on the block is contributing.
Okay.
So, I just want to say first off, thank you for the porch. I appreciate that. But I can't approve a 2-story home on this street because there may be a small 2-story home on the corner and maybe the block over there are 2-story homes going up. But to put a 2-story home on this street in that particular spot completely changes the nature of the neighborhood. And then that opens the door for the next person who buys a house to come along and say, well, this is damaged, I want to tear it down, and there's a 2-story house there. And it kind of opens up this Pandora's box. So I really appreciate some of the details you have and the porch, but I can't do 2-story. And you know, my house, I have a family of 6. Our house is 1,000 square foot, 1947's cottage. You don't need 1,600 square foot to house a family.
Okay. Any other board comments? Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I do have a few questions and comments. Actually, I echo my fellow board member Liz in her comment and concern. Usually, when narrow streets get approved for 2-story exceptional, there is a huge recess in the front setback. So, correct me if I'm wrong. The front setback is 10 foot. Is that also the dimension in the layout is not pretty much clear? Are they 10 foot?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
The front
I think
setback.
it's 10 in the front and 5 on the sides.
Yeah, the front setback, is it 10 foot?
Yes.
The front is 10, the
Yeah.
back is 20, but the front porch can come into that 10 feet.
No, it does not. So the 10 foot is the same as the nearby houses?
The adjacent houses?
Yeah,
They're similar. I don't know if they're exactly the same.
Yeah, but it's just like we usually do an approximation. So if the
Yeah.
house is still standing on the same kind of distance, that's gonna overtake the block and it's gonna be distinguishable, which is what Ms. Kaufman said, that the other house that she was referring to stands out. So I have like an internal request too, if we could, like in Exhibit 1, request applicants like this one, just delineate the boundaries so we can start looking at the setbacks and compare, not based on memory but based on record. And what we see here, I think it's gonna be helpful to see, because there are situations when a two-story house get approved and served on boards before, but they have to be very distinguishably kind of way recessed from the front property line. But in this case, it's actually, almost the same as the nearby, so it's gonna stand out as a giant massing in a block that, that's all of it is one story and at the same distance. I also have issues in general to have like approval for demolition and new construction in one shot without seeing details of all the drawings of the new construction. So if I request from my fellow board member in the chair, if we could split the decision into looking at the demolition, and when we got the full kind of set of drawings and layout and setback, and then if you want to refer to blocks, we want to see where those blocks are. That's going to be helpful, and we can look at broader context to the decision. The other question I have, the construction, the structure report, is it the one that came in January, or this is just came in recently? Because it says in the agenda, was an application that came in January the 4th. So would the structure report came in January, or my point is that has the building continued to decay over time?
It has continued. Nothing's been done to the building since January. I don't believe I had the structural report when this came in January. This didn't even really come before you. It was submitted with those other three that you reviewed a couple streets away, but this particular one was withdrawn because there was no plan for the new building.
Right.
And so I did not want to bring a demolition request to you. It was just a demo. It was split originally. It was just a demolition COA. And I did not want to bring a demolition COA to you when the code's very clear about, well, in Pleasant Street, we need to see what's going in its place. So that application was actually withdrawn. It never really came in front of you, but I did not see the engineering report at that time.
Was there an engineering report in January when the initial request for a COA for demolition was initially submitted to the staff?
The owner made the demolition application. He applied to the building department, and they told him he needed to apply for a COA, so he did. He didn't understand the process, and he didn't have an engineering report. All that has been done since then, and we didn't have any design to replace the house.
So what's the date of the engineering report?
I don't have that in front of me. I think it's in your packet, isn't it?
No, it doesn't have a date.
There was one being passed down the desk.
Yeah, it doesn't have a date as far as I saw.
I did not obtain that. The owner obtained that, so I'm not
And
terribly
it's just like,
familiar with it.
I'm curious, I looked at this, but I don't think it has a date. My point is that could the building have been saved, should an engineer report done in January? And I don't know. I mean, that's a question of having the building continue to be exposed to all environmental condition without being protected during that time. So I'm gonna stop here.
Okay. All right. Other board member comment? Okay, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. just looking at the new design, assuming the front porch was 10 feet back from the property line and that matched up with the adjacent house, we still have a big problem here because the second floor comes out over the front porch. So the mass of the house would be coming out, actually more than the house adjacent. It's one thing to have a low roof coming out the way a front porch does, but when the mass comes out above it, it kind of accentuates the height, which is a real problem in this case. The other thing is, given the consideration that it's only a 31-foot lot, and then 5-foot setbacks, which are extremely close on either side, that once again kind of accentuates the height of the building. If it had been a wider lot, I don't think I would have any issues with it. The one thing I did just want to point out is that the vernacular of the, I guess it would be the scale and the spacing of opens and voids and all that. The double and multiple, like triple windows and all that is really out of character for these simple little houses. If you look at it, pretty much everything up and down the street, they all have single windows that are quite small by today's standards. And where you have the double windows on the second floor, that just kind of doesn't really speak to the existing vocabulary that's up and down the street. So that's something that would need to be looked at. But I too kind of have an issue with the scale of it because these are exceptionally small houses in this area. And just wanted to bring those things to your attention. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Is there any public that would like to speak to the issue? Okay. Come up and announce your name.
Dottie Fabercy, resident of the Pleasant Street neighborhood, and I know this house very well. I've walked by it for many years, and it has been deteriorating all this time. I remember the person who lived there, and she passed. I cannot imagine a two-story structure on that little space next to those little houses, and I didn't realize until Chair Reeves said that you had the structure up above is looming over it. I can't imagine it. That's all I want to say. I'm not in favor of a two-story. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Anna Silva. I've lived on 3rd Street for 27 years almost. I bought my house at an affordable housing auction that the city put on. It had, I don't know, almost 30 houses in Porter's, 5th Avenue, Pleasant Street that were boarded up, had been for many years. Mine was, I've seen pictures of I walked, around it, of course, before the auction, all of that. It was in bad shape. Maybe not quite as bad as this house appears to be, but a lot of the houses on the auction were really, have been boarded up for years, if not decades, and had major issues going with them. My lot is 50 by 100, as are all my neighbors. And so far, on our end of 3rd Street down near 8th Avenue, those blocks from 5th Avenue on are, I think they were all, I believe, 1 story until the Andrew Coffee, things started going up, taking up the entire properties, which is a source of irritation for some neighbors. Anyway, so the lot size shouldn't be a big problem. My house is 930 square feet. It's 2-bedroom, but it could go back farther, deeper into the lot if the owner needs more space. But I know that set of houses too, and I think it would just be awful. And frankly, no offense meant to anybody who approved them or is building them, but those big, skinny 2-story things with little windows in them up at the top, they just look like cracker boxes. They're so unimaginative. They're getting squeezed onto narrow lots, and it's, it just doesn't fit with the neighborhood so far. So I don't know. I would agree with Dr. Kamal that maybe this just needs to go back to the drawing board before you approve anything, the demolition or, an adapted design that fits with the houses that are there, that fits with the character of the neighborhood, and not approve another one of these big two-story things, new two-story things. And again, every demolition that can be prevented is an asset. And I appreciate Ms. Kaufman's report and pointing out the real problems that Pleasant Street is up against, as the houses are now going for nearly $500,000. We've seen a lot of speculation with the last downturn in housing, and anything that you can do to help maintain the smallness, the character of it, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Not seeing anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Todd Bicker, and I own a house on 4th Place at 225, which is right next to this gentleman's house. And my mom and I, and you guys might know her very well, Darlene Henricks, and I bought this house. And she is, by the way, strongly opposed to this demolition. And we bought the house to preserve the house and keep the house the way it looks and the way it is. You know, we're gonna update the porch, make it an open aired porch like they should be, and potentially add 2 more bedrooms on the back, which has plenty of room, by the way. So I have worked on another house on 7th Avenue by the Cotton Club, and it was in worse shape than this house. And I have managed to renovate it and remodel it and bring it back. And I think that, you know, anybody with a little bit of time of money can do the same thing. So that's why Darlene Henricks and I are strongly opposed to this demolition, mainly because if you buy in a historic district, you must abide by the historic district rules. And it isn't to buy a house and let it sit until it's beyond repair and then say, oh, well, we can't repair it and we need to tear it down. So, and I've seen that more and more happen in this area. The 3 condos, townhouses, whatever, that are behind the church are all hardy board plank. There's double windows, there's a back porch, there's a front porch. It's 2-story, it's a monster. It doesn't look like anything in the neighborhood. And then on the other side, on 2nd, there are little houses that they've built the same way with hardy board. And it doesn't look like historic, Pleasant Street anymore. If they want to remodel this house and keep the facade and then just add on to the back, that would be totally appropriate, but not a total demolition. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right.
Chairman, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Obviously, I'm no architect, but I was just wondering, and the suggestion is to have it demolished, but from your understanding, to what extent does this building need to be demolished, or can it really be saved and preserved with the right amount of money and resources?
This is where you get into a kind of a shady area because the amount of money in today's market it would take to rebuild this house would be substantial for the size house you end up with. Ultimately, it would end up being quite an expensive house. Obviously, the back end of it would need to come off no matter what to be rebuilt because that's where the most significant damage. But seeing the interiors, the floors are gone, everything's kind of already been gutted out of it. So there's not a lot of historic fabric left. It's a judgment call. Anything can be restored if somebody's willing to put enough money into it. But as far as us, is it economically feasible? That's where, this house is questionable.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is almost an interesting case where you could maybe talk about pure recreation of the historic house.
It would be cheaper to recreate it certainly than it probably would be to fix this one.
And you have, with appropriate materials that match.
Yes.
I agree. I would still just cautious to verify the date of the engineering report, but I definitely, I was in the back of my mind also talk about the material, and if you do have a plan to reuse and repurpose the materials, should the design be reconsidered for all the comments the boards and the chair have provided?
Another quick question, I'm sorry. Do we know how long the owner has owned this lot?
Mr. Kaplan, do you know that answer?
I don't know exactly, but it's a very short period of time, just a few months.
Okay, that's fine.
This house was deteriorated when you bought it.
Correct.
When we brought the other three to you, that was almost right after he had acquired all of those properties.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I say something?
Yes.
Something to keep in mind when you're thinking about what's left and what can be actually salvaged from this. There's a lot of engineering and wind load calculations that exist in our building market now, that this structure is almost a danger. If a hurricane were to come through, this could be thrown in any direction.
Right.
And to rebuild it as is, I don't know, engineering wise with today's specifications, even like this couldn't be possible.
Yeah, you would have to replace over 50% of the value of the building, which means you're gonna have to bring everything up to current codes, which basically almost forces you into reconstruction at this point. And the problem is for any developer doing it, to build something this small and have any real value to it, or as much money as you have it be worth as much as you're putting into it, is difficult without making it larger. So that's the dilemma. Bill?
Mr. Chairman, question in hand is not, I think, one of demolition, but the scale of the replacement. So I see us confining the conversation to the scale of that which will replace it.
The proposal.
So,
Okay. Any other? Yes, yes.
I just wanted to note that I understand the hardship. The place is very deteriorated. However, when one purchases property in a historic district, in a multi-layered, with the criteria, you inform yourself about what you're purchasing, and you have a responsibility, because you can buy an empty piece of land and do what you want on it somewhere else, in theory. So I also would like to see the demolition or the engineering report, because it does look bad, but I don't feel comfortable approving a demo right now, and especially with the house design. If we are going to do that in one fell swoop, I'm not comfortable with that, and I would need some more information, I think. And I know that materials are expensive right now, but building a 3-bedroom, 2-story is also a big investment too. So this is a historic area, and there are rules that we need to, I think, be pretty stringent about. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, given the conversation, is there anybody else on board that would like to make comments? Okay. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should provide an opportunity for the applicant to resubmit and therefore continue.
Okay. Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Well, I think we should do a roll call for that.
Okay, yes, please. That's a good
Sorry,
idea.
Mr. Chair.
No, I agree.
So the motion is to have the applicant resubmit a new design
Uh,
or a
Yeah, to resubmit in clearly the architect before us is aware of our conversation and where we're going with this, and is thoroughly capable of submitting an acceptable design.
Would you say you would like the applicant to resubmit an
If the applicant wishes to continue and resubmit, I would propose that that be done.
and to consider restoration, recreation, or submittal of a new construction that is more?
This is, we're talking about replacement.
Okay.
Could we stipulate the motion? Or add?
The demolition would be contingent upon the approval of the resubmission.
Could we add with a dated engineering report?
What?
Please.
Yeah, because what we have is not dated, we don't know when it was done.
With a dated?
Yeah,
Dated?
engineering report, yeah.
You okay with that?
What?
You okay with that?
They're asking for a dated engineer report.
Yeah, okay.
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 If that's acceptable to you, okay.
No, thank you for clarifying, because I'm the one that has to write this up.
And also on your second, do you accept that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay. Nathaniel Courtney,
Me?
Philip Pate,
Aye.
Liz Hawk,
Aye.
Rachel Iannelli,
Aye.
Dr. Kamal,
Aye.
Jay Reeves,
Aye.
Bill Warner.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Could I just ask for a clarification of those conditions? I'm not sure I heard.
So my original conditions that are in the staff report have nothing to do with the new motion.
Yeah,
The new motion is to resubmit the application and that your demolition request is going to be contingent upon the new design as submitted.
right. Okay.
And once I do the minutes and flesh out some of the board comments, I can also provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to public hearing number 2.
Public hearing 2. This is petition COA 22-000023, certificate of appropriateness for the new construction of a rear covered patio lanai. This is at 630 Northeast 10th Avenue. It is a contributing structure in the Northeast District, also known as the Duck Pond. We have dates of construction of 1940 or 1941. The owner is Debbie Joseph. This is a corner property, so it's at Northeast 10th Avenue and Northeast 6th Terrace. It's a classic, adorable example of the minimal traditional style. It features brick siding as the preliminary material, vertical wood scallop siding within the gable ends. So the minimal traditional home was most prevalent in the pre and post World War II era. This was a housing style that was affordable because of its smaller size, yet still very classic, because these minimal traditional homes took little elements from the more traditional styles. Minimal traditional. So it's really a nice example of this. In this case, the use of, and it's not always evident or apparent right away what style they're really trying to refer to. So this is kind of my best guess, but the use of brick in the front-facing gable and that prominent decorative chimney, These are actually reminiscent of the Tudor style in its form and scale. So the applicant is proposing to remodel the garage to the rear of the house and add a shed-roofed 18-foot by 27-foot lanai covered patio. That new shed roof is going to tie into the existing roof and will be clad with matching architectural shingles. Now, I will add in here that that whole end of the house where this garage exists, that is an addition. That's a later addition to begin with. The existing garage door faces west towards Northeast 7th Terrace and will be mostly enclosed, but a series of 4 clerestory windows will be placed near the roofline to provide some light. The bay is on the north side of the garage, including a picture window, central door, and 2 clerestory windows. The proposed rehab will create a door where that large picture window is and will widen the locations of the 2 clerestory windows. And this is all facing the backyard, essentially. It's nothing you're going to see from the front. A window on the north of the main house, which is the back side, is also being proposed to be replaced with an exit door. And another single window on the north side is proposed to be enlarged into a set of 3 windows. I spoke to the contractor just today about this project. They're actually doing away with the whole concept of taking out the window and putting in another door. They're not going to do that. And that series of 3 windows is where the kitchen is. And so they'd like more light to come into the kitchen, which is why they're wanting just to widen that window. The property is zoned RSF3. The side setbacks to a street are 7.5 feet. The rear setback is 15 feet. This new proposal does not infringe on either of those setbacks, does not require a variance from zoning. According to that permit history that I did, that addition and alteration, the addition of the garage was done in 2018. This added that entire garage structure to the west of the original historic home. Proposed new shed roof patio will be to the rear of the house. The new addition does not come further west towards the street. So it's not coming out any closer than the existing building is now. The application was lacking photographs or documentation of those existing windows on the north side. Once again, I spoke to him today about that lacking documentation. So he's going to get me photographs of the one little window they do still want to take out to put the 3 windows in, but changing out the window to the doorway, that part of the project's not happening anymore. They're just not going to do that part. The applicable Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation that are applied in this situation are standards 9 and 10. Standard 9 is about new additions and exterior alterations. It shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and the architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. The proposed alteration to the garage and the addition of the lanai is not being made to the original historic portion of the house. The new work is clearly differentiated from the old by using a material different from the original brick. The window configuration is clearly modern. The new patio is to the rear of the house and it's compatible with the massing, size, and scale. It won't detract from the historic building. The proposed alterations on the rear of the historic portion of the house now only is limited to that one window, and I have requested that they provide documentation as to what that one window is. I don't know if it's a historic wood frame window or not. Standard 10, new additions and adjacent or related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and the integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. Again, this related new construction will not physically affect the existing historic structure. Theoretically, it could be removed in the future without harming the original historic house. Staff recommends that application COA 22-000023 be approved with the following condition Applicant shall provide additional photo documentation to the one window on the historic portion of the house that they're proposing to remove. And applicant shall work with staff to see if the historic window that is being replaced can be reused as part of that window enlargement. We also talked about making sure like anything that goes in there kind of will match the historic windows on the back of the house.
Okay. Okay, is there anyone here to speak to this project? Okay, seeing no one. Board questions, comments?
I have several comments. One, about 2004, I did an extensive renovation to the original two-bedroom, one-bath house. It happens, and then I more recently did the major addition to the west. It happens that these were the new windows in the addition were largely Marvin Integrity Series units. It was back in the 2004 that the gable lights, west-facing gable sash, was put in when the attic space was made habitable. I find the proposal of the west-facing, what's now garage access, the proposed fenestration there is completely incompatible with the rest of the house, that all that is to say that is visible from either the street or the avenue, and needs serious reconfiguration.
I have a question on that. Is it because of the roof line pitch of the existing?
We're talking, you've got these what appear to be awning lights facing west that are highly visible. This is in that area that proposes to change the garage door and passage door elevation above.
Okay.
The treatment proposed is, it's highly visible and completely visually inconsistent, incompatible with the other two, or the other that and the other elevation of the house that's readily visible.
Okay. Are there additional comments? Anybody else?
I actually.
Yes.
Does that, are you suggesting that you would prefer to see 6/6 windows there?
Certainly a more rectilinear proportion than in a greater harmony with all the other visible windows. Not to distinguish them from the other windows, they would not necessarily need to be multi-light windows. But the north-facing awning units were not visible really.
Right.
In the addition, but these are highly visible.
I see.
And very inconsistent with the house. I would, if they were 1/1 and more consistent with the predominant proportion of window, that would, I think, be more appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I was just gonna say, I was gonna speak to the windows as well, facing west. I think the proportions need to be more consistent. They don't need to be the divided light per se, but that's just my opinion.
Size and proportion.
Size and proportion. Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. Okay, petition COA 22-00023. Move to approve with the condition that the west-facing sash be more consistent with the proportions of the existing sash, and detailed documentation supported or provided to staff.
Okay. Any note of window construction? Or any note of material? Consistent?
Yeah, at least something like Marvin integrity, but definitely not vinyl or any other material that we have not approved in the historic district.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
You want me to do roll call or?
Might as well.
Yeah.
Nathaniel Courtney.
Aye.
Phil Haight.
Aye.
Liz Hawk.
Aye.
Rachel Iannelli.
Aye.
Dr. Kamal.
Aye.
Jay Reeves.
Aye.
Bill Warner.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now, just for the record, am not involved in this, and the proposed alterations.
Okay. Okay. What brings us next to board business?
Yes. Shall I continue with A?
Yes.
So at the last meeting, you heard from some Pleasant Street residents about their concern over that temporary street closure, kind of tucked next to Flaco Tacos on University and Southwest 2nd Street. And you had instructed staff to draft a resolution, and that resolution is part of your packet. So I don't know if you've had time to look it over, but I could read it into the record, and then you could maybe decide if you wanted to vote to approve that or not. This is Resolution 2022-01, a resolution encouraging the City of Gainesville Commission to reconsider residents' concerns over the temporary street closure at University Avenue and Southwest 2nd Street. Whereas, in an effort to assist local businesses and restaurants through the national pandemic crisis, which started in 2020, the City of Gainesville allowed certain streets to temporarily be closed so that adjoining restaurants could provide outdoor dining. And whereas several residents from the Pleasant Street Historic District appeared in front of the City Commission, including meetings held on July 19th, 2021 and November 18th, 2021, to request that the temporary street closure at Southwest 2nd Street and University Avenue be reopened. And whereas residents then appeared before the Historic Preservation Board on March 1st, 2022, to express concerns that one of their major entrances into their historic district had been restricted, potentially affecting response times from rescue vehicles, and is making access for their own residents difficult since there are a variety of one-way streets that limit the ways to enter their neighborhood. And whereas those residents also expressed concerns that the outdoor dining space is currently unattractive, is not being kept up, and is not being utilized enough to warrant the street remaining closed. And whereas some residents feel that this particular closure impacts a local neighborhood much more than the downtown block that is currently closed off at Southwest First Avenue, which the city has considered keeping permanently pedestrian. Now therefore be it resolved by the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Gainesville, Florida, that the City Commission consider rehearing the street closure issue at an upcoming commission meeting to try and resolve the concerns of Pleasant Street's residents, and to let the Pleasant Street Neighborhood Association or interested parties know at what meeting that might be scheduled for.
I've moved to approve that resolution.
Second.
Aye.
Yes, Dottie?
I just want to say that it is Northwest Second Street, not Southwest. There's about 3 places where that needs to be changed to Northwest Second Street.
Thank you.
Amended.
Okay, we will get all that corrected.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that now? Consent vote?
All right. We just,
As corrected,
As corrected. Okay.
just an aye.
but you need to take a vote.
Yep. All those in favor of the motion as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries. Thank you.
I would like to say thank you to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, Mr. Chair, may I move along?
Yes.
Okay. At the back of your, or did I hand you, are you seeing something that's,
This one?
yes, that one, thank you. So, you will see that not everything is stuff we specifically are doing, but we have been working closely with local museums, and we've even reached out to Micanopy to see if it would be okay if we promoted that historic window workshop, and they said absolutely. So it looks like we have a very fun-filled month ahead of us for National Historic Preservation Month. I would like to point out to you this Thursday, if you can be there, this Thursday at the City Commission meeting in this very room, the mayor will be giving the Historic Preservation Board. I really hope you can be there because he's expecting to give it to the chair, and
Okay.
any of the board members that come will be able to stand up and get photographed with the mayor.
What's it to?
It's at 5:30.
5:30.
It's the evening commission, and proclamations are at the beginning of that agenda. So we are the second proclamation up.
Okay.
So around 5:30, 5:45. And I so hope you can come this Thursday. It's been a very long time since we have done proclamations to recognize National Historic Preservation Month. So I'm really happy that you all are going to get presented with that. Also, very important on this list is Wednesday, May 25th. That is the date we have been able to secure the Matheson History Museum, and they're going to co-host our Historic Preservation Awards, which you all have already voted on. So that will be it is open to the public, and we hope to get a good turnout for our first annual Historic Preservation Awards. And there will be some very deserving people finally getting recognized. And so please, do your best to be there, of course, but also you're welcome to send this flyer out to anybody you may think of. Students too. Students can come too. That workshop that is in Micanopy, this is being presented by Austin Historical, which is Scott Seidler and Company, and they are truly one of the most astounding historic window restoration companies I have ever worked with. They do huge historic preservation projects, and small projects for historic homeowners. So they do the gamut. They get a lot of the work as it comes down through state grant projects because they have the staff and the equipment to handle really large historic windows. If you have any historic windows, if you're a homeowner, if you're a contractor, if you're a builder, if you do anything in this town where you're remotely involved with historic windows, this is a great opportunity. It's a free event, and normally these workshops cost quite a bit of money to have Austin Historical share their knowledge. So it is in Micanopy, and that is on Friday, May 20th. That's from 9 in the morning to noon. So you'd have to take the morning off, but I will definitely be there. Friday, May 20th. And then the other events are some of the local exhibits we have going on. We have an event at the Cotton Club. There's a book release that's happening at the Aquin Jones House and Museum, and there you go. Historic Preservation Month.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in regard to the window workshop, I reached out to some others that may be contemplating getting into the business. This would be a must-do. Jody Rubin is part of that team, and I know started window restoration on her own. Put together a very dynamic team of women to do exactly that, developed a terrific reputation, and ultimately was bought out by a firm in St. Pete. But it's certainly an opportunity for anybody with entrepreneurial spirit to really get a tremendous introduction to how to do it right. So.
Okay.
No, it's for you.
Okay.
Oh, am I still going?
Yeah, you got one left.
Oh, well, items of interest will be provided to you by email.
Okay. All right.
Most likely tomorrow.
All right. Something I wanted to bring up is if we could get an update on the CHW presentation on the project, 12-story building just south of the University Heights South, adjacent to where the Swamp Restaurant's being reconstructed.
Sure. So as you know, at your board workshop, you were notified to come last week to the plan board where they were supposed to consider a 12-story, partially 12-story building that the actual lot is not in our historic district, but our historic district literally wraps around it on 3 sides. That is University Heights South District. So it's Southwest 2nd Avenue and 10th Street is the cross street. So at the beginning of that plan board meeting, the applicants had not shown up to the meeting yet. At the beginning of the meeting, there was a room entirely full of people, I assume from that neighborhood, there to speak against it. The plan board recognized that the room was full of people, and they knew that it was for that item, and that item was last on the agenda. So the plan board said, we want to deal with this first, and instead of making these people wait for the however many hours that meeting would have taken. And then they decided to actually defer the item because the plan board, it was a several 100-page staff report, and the plan board felt they didn't really have enough time to kind of get into all of that, and they felt that because of the emails and the comments that had been provided to them from neighbors and citizens, they felt like they weren't really given enough time or notice about this, so they deferred the item to the end of this month.
Okay. My question also has to do with, when we received, information about when the meeting was, we were gonna have to be, if we spoke, we were gonna have to speak as private individuals.
Right.
Is there anything we can do about that now that we are actually meeting?
There is. There is. So if you had come to last week's plan board, you as a board had not yet talked about it or made a resolution or anything like that. So you were certainly welcome to speak on that item as to whatever you personally may have thought of that project. But if you wanted to make a cohesive statement about that project, and you would need to do so through a resolution, and you would have had to have waited till the board met, which now you have the opportunity to do so, because that plan board meeting is now at the end of this month, where they're gonna hear that item.
Okay.
And at that time, you could certainly, if you were to do a resolution or have me draft a resolution here, you could then go to that plan board meeting and you could certainly say I am on the preservation board and this is what
Okay.
we think.
All right, what would be the procedure? We would go ahead and have a discussion about it now and see if there's a consensus. Okay,
Consensus for a resolution.
right. All right. Well, since we're talking about it, do any of the board members have any comments on this proposal?
Well, my understanding of the proposal before the board is that this, the huge proposal would dramatically negatively affect the contiguous properties in terms of being able to maintain scale, what we just spent quite a bit of time talking about, the scale of what is in the historic district right next to it. So for that incompatible scale is essentially the criticism and reason for denial.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I also might like to add, because we have new board members who may not know the intricacies of all our code yet. So, in our code, if you are doing new construction within 100 feet of one of our historic districts, there are height requirements. Most of our historic districts, that height requirement, that height limitation is 3 stories within the 100 feet buffer zone, if you will, of a historic district. University Heights South, where this project is proposed, that requirement, the height limitation, it's already in there. They gave them an extra story, so you can do 4 stories. So within the 100 feet of our historic district, which actually does encompass much of this project parcel, it's supposed to be 4 stories. And I think you all have seen an elevation of this project. I can send one out again if not. But the current plan it's actually 2 buildings. So the building closer to University is proposed to be 5 stories in height, and then the building further south is partially 12, partially 5 stories.
Okay.
But the concern would be, we have this buffer for a reason.
Right.
And if you start approving projects that just don't even respond to this, what hope do we have for the rest of our historic districts? Why even have that buffer?
Right. Well, this is exactly what I was getting ready to ask you about, so that explains it pretty well. And this is in the comp plan?
The height,
The buffer, the requirement?
it's in the zoning code, and I can send you that exact page. It's all in one page of our zoning code.
Yeah, I would appreciate that if you could send out a fresh copy of that, because I wasn't quite, I knew about it, but wasn't quite sure where it occurred.
Yeah, it's not actually in your historic preservation ordinance, it's in the zoning code. So there's parts of the zoning code, though, that do reference our historic districts.
Okay.
We also get like for the record, the exact address and any exhibits you may have or the elevation of the proposal. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, further comments from anyone?
So I looked at what you sent and I was really concerned about the height. We see a lot of like 5/1s and 6/1s, but those are mainly in and around like 13th and University. And this is starting to get further and further back into that neighborhood. And there's already, like, there's the sorority house going in, and there's that big construction on 5th, which kind of borders that. And so 12 stories is just outrageous to me. And I don't understand why they just can't build a nice, like, 4-story complex in the area. 12 just seems completely ridiculous for that whole region. And my concern is that's approved, like you said, you get that attrition where now we're approving larger and larger buildings in our buffer zone, and it's like, why do we even have this code if we're not going to follow it? I'm also really tired of the city. Now I know CHW worked really hard on moving some homes for the sorority, and they're willing to work with the city on certain things, but I can't with this. It's just so almost disrespectful.
Yeah. Well, my question is, I know some of us are on the board are concerned. The question is, are we to the point where we could draft a resolution that would give us the opportunity to speak? Or at least, do we have any consensus is, I guess, where I'm going with this? How does the board seem to feel this? I'm very worried about this personally because this is something I've seen coming for a long time. The pressure on the historic districts, and we've got the same thing with University Heights North. We got projects that have actually intruded into the district already, and this is something that's going to continue. And I think we have to really be there to kind of defend the buffer and talk to each project as it comes up. And so
That's our job.
yeah, I'm very much in favor of drafting a resolution in this case. Because otherwise, it's just little old me speaking to them. It's better if it's coming from the board as a group.
Well, okay, to support you on that, I move that we do provide a resolution to be presented to the board in support of supporting our buffer intentions.
And it should explicitly say that we'd like to keep it at 4 stories, 4 to 5 stories.
What the limits are.
Can we, yeah, what
What the actual,
The point is, we want to emphasize what is in place
right.
in the way of the code.
I agree, and I think it's up to the architect to go and revisit and do like a staggered height. So, but it's just the law is the law, and the code is the code, and that's our role to protect.
And there is a piece of the parcel that's not actually in the buffer, and that's where the 12-story is, but it still affects the historic district. Do you want the resolution to talk about that at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like that, but it
Yeah.
has to be worded appropriately, which
Yeah.
we look to you for, right?
It definitely affects the context of where the historic district is located. Buildings of that height, especially when they're going to the maximum and then they're going even taller because of bonus points and things like that.
Okay. I have a motion before us.
A second.
Okay? Yes.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment because or question to Kathleen. Have you seen like any situation like this where they're gonna go to the Board of Appropriateness to make up or to offset a limited height or a height cap, and they make that up, so we may end up with 15 stories outside the buffer just to make up for the project profit. And that's one concern I have.
Well, so right now, that lot is supposed to be 4 stories in that buffer, and it's 6 stories is the current zoning. They can go up to 8 if they provide all these various bonuses and this and that. The issue is, they're applying for a change in zoning, so that they don't have to deal with any of those current requirements.
Okay.
You
is
see
this
what I
like-
mean? They want what they're asking for is to change the zoning.
So they don't have to worry about the buffer. So PD, is that what this is?
So the
This is a PD request.
The opposition would be to the change in zoning.
Plan development?
Plan
where you-
development.
Where you change the zoning and you write your own rules? Yeah. The way you want it?
Had, just a quick question, and I know this isn't our peer review, but just for my own, has the developer offered any, affordable housing in this development, or is it all just luxury student living?
I think there
There
is
is
component.
they are offering a small percentage
Yeah.
of the total housing units.
And that's my worry, is they'll say, oh, we'll give you 10 units, and the city will be like, okay, we'll do that, and that's not a real trade-off to me. It's not.
Okay, we have a motion.
We have it. We have a second.
We have a second. We don't really need a roll call for this, do we? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries. All right, thank you.
I have 2 other additional comments, Mr. Chair,
Yes. go for it.
unless other board members want to go first. Because we're in board member comments, right?
Right.
I did want to introduce to you Miss Femetta Lewis. She is a new planner, a relatively new planner with us, but she is not new to the city. She was with housing for some time. So she's like, hey, I want to come to your historic preservation board. And I'm like, really? So I have to tell you, like, she's super interested in what you do. And she's always asking me, what is this about? What is this about? Can you explain this to me? So it's so wonderful having a planner up there with us that is interested in what you all are doing. So please help me welcome Miss Lewis.
Welcome.
And I just wanted to give you a very quick update. This is the last thing I have for you. Saturday morning was the charrette workshop at Old Mount Carmel Baptist Church. We had architects from the REG architects from West Palm Beach came up. They have been doing these neighborhood charrettes for so long and for so many communities that we knew they would have it handled and under control, and they did. And we probably ended up with about 40 people that morning. It was a wonderful event, and the charrette process, as you know, is you break all the residents that came out into the groups of tables, and we've got pins and stickers and Post-it notes, and they're supposed to be marking up maps and talking about how do we want to see this amazing, very significant historic structure, the church, how are we going to see it continue its life? Because it's no longer being used as a church. But Pastor Duncan has this very wonderful vision for a community center and a civil rights museum, because this was the place where a lot of the civil rights meetings and strategizing took place. And the NAACP, the one that really got going in Gainesville, this is where they met. So it has a deep history in that. And the residents, like, once you get their creative juices going, there's like no stopping them. And so they had a ton of ideas, and these will all be incorporated into the final charrette report. And we have some really great photographs of the event, and the architects will put all that together. That will be available to you in a couple of months. This is sort of the last big piece of an architectural assessment. We've been doing the city and the University of Florida joined up, and because the church was not yet a 501c3 at the time, so we joined up and applied for a state grant on behalf of the church and got a $50,000 grant to do the architectural assessment. And that is a very, very key first step before you can go for the big money for the actual restoration. You have to have a document by the engineers and the architects that says, this is the condition of the building, this is what's needed. So that's what we are doing, and this charrette process was kind of like a final key piece to that, so that we can sort of start to decide what are we going to use this building for in the future.
Yep. Great.
So I have a question that's actually related to that. I was talking to the board at the Cotton Club Museum the other day, and they're looking to have the same thing happen with the shotgun houses. They were informing me that a group from FAMU and Florida State had proposed to do it before, but they had never heard anything, or they haven't heard anything from them. So I was just wondering, how would we go about helping with that? Are there resources, or could we get involved in that in any way?
Well, the city, I mean, I can certainly, because they are a 501c3, and they would definitely be eligible for a variety of grants. So once Miss Vivian is back on her feet, you know, I'm sure I'm happy to help them kind of identify some of those opportunities. And anything that involves survey in the city, of course, I am very interested in anyway. So we would definitely, we would definitely be able to help guide them as to, you know, appropriate consultants to use, and like what they should expect and what they could expect those costs to be, and funding sources.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I just have a question really, really quickly. So last year we had a house that was, I think, by Roper Park. It was like an original Gainesville homestead. We had codes come and say, we're tearing this house down.
Yeah.
And then Michelle rallied and we found someone to buy it and remodel it. And I had requested at the time that the city take its GIS technology and take, you know, its historic homes map and find a way to track the homes that are of historic value, that have master site files, and try to prevent them from getting to that point. And the house in Pleasant Street kind of brought that back, because the city has all these heirs property programs now, and they're really trying to keep original homeowners and original communities in these historic neighborhoods. And I'm wondering, is there any progress on that mapping? Because I feel like homes like that, the city could say, oh, this is piling up in codes, it's deteriorating, and then try to save it before we have to tear it down and new construction is built. So I'm just wondering if there was, I think at the time we really only had Jason as a support. So I don't know if that ever went forward, but I think that would be, now that we have a full-time staff, that would be really helpful to keep track of our dwindling historic resources in a way that maybe we could save them before it got to that point.
So that's very interesting, and something I would like to inquire and bring back to this board as kind of an update item, because I have not heard of any of that. I do know that, well, if you're talking just about the historic houses within our own districts, that's thousands of structures.
Yeah.
And that's not even covering the houses we don't yet have protected.
Right.
So I'm not entirely sure how they would, we do have some pretty advanced GIS stuff happening, and we do have a new GIS person actually in planning. So let me get with him and find out what that would even entail, how we would go about doing that. It's a great idea, but it needs to also dovetail with our whole effort to enhance our demolition by neglect regulations. I will say that since I have come on board, do you know I've been here 9 months?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
I was just thinking today, and I digress just for a second. Today is the day it happened, right? I and two of them were here tonight. I went into Publix and I knew like 4 people. I was like, this is so exciting. Like I can go into a Publix and see people I know. It was so crazy. I was like, oh man, I'm so native now. Yes.
Yes.
1 month just before. So.
You're 1 month more?
Yeah.
You're 10 months.
10 months in Florida.
Yeah.
That's all my whole experience.
Wow. In all of Florida, but your only time in Florida, so you're really the newbie. You'll have to go to Publix with me. But having that new GIS person, and where I was going with that is, now that I've been here for a little while, I do feel codes, because I've already had, I gave them a workshop like the second month I was there about, and all the codes people came that morning, about historic preservation and what it is we're looking for and why are we so particular about this, that, and the other, and why is this so important. And so they definitely understand that I am there now, and they have been coming by, knocking on my office door. Hey, you might want to look at this property because this is kind of on our radar soon. So I think just them acknowledging that someone in the city is looking out after the historic buildings, and also, as you probably know, we've switched to a new permitting platform called CitizenServe. We still have project docs, and in project docs, I am now one of the people that has to sign off on demolitions.
Yay.
So that's really good. So we are taking strides in that way. As far as like a really large GIS mapping project, I will find out. And also, I have mentioned to my higher ups that, soon we're going to need to resurvey our historic districts. Hasn't been done in a couple of decades, so.
I don't mean to make it difficult, but do you also track vacant buildings? That goes hands in hand.
But I think the city does to some extent.
Code enforcement should.
Yeah, I think the city tracks vacancies.
So it could be vacant and,
Bill.
If we've covered that, something I'm going to bring up regard to Thomas Center. My general perception is that the Thomas Center is probably the second most publicly used property that the city inhabits. And simply put, it's getting a bit run down. I would like for us to find a way to be supportive of keeping it up. I stood before it last week. The pergola has conspicuously peeling paint on the south entry. The doors are beginning to look shabby.
Roof tiles are missing.
Yeah, it's not being kept up. And by, as Jay says, roof tiles missing, peeling paint, it's not a good example to the community of how you should be taking care of your general assets, let alone your historic assets. So rather than to make a criticism of how it got there, I would like for us to take a positive approach in trying to support those who might have the opportunity to affect a little bit better maintenance of Thomas Center.
Yes, duly noted. And you're not the only one that's noticed.
Yeah.
I've already procured quotes for both cleaning the roof tiles, which are now mostly black, and pressure washing some of the building, and sealing up holes in and around the roof to prevent the rodents and the squirrels from getting into the ceilings and the roof. One of the really difficult issues we're having with getting quotes for roofers who can do the pressure cleaning of the roof is that we have some really difficult courtyards that are not accessible, and you have large stepped walkways cutting off any equipment access to get into the courtyards. So they're trying to figure out how will we get up and over to even pressure wash those sides of the roof. So we have been getting quotes on that so far. My intent, just because that's what I tend to do, I've been walking around the building. We clearly have water intrusion there. We clearly have this here. So I've been doing a little bit of an architectural assessment already on the building. Once I get a few more quotes, I'd like to put something more formal together to present to my boss, who can then either send it to city manager or commission or however that tends to work. The issue is, and I know there's some commissioners that see the same thing and have said the same thing to me. They've actually said to me, "What are you going to do about the Thomas Center?" I'm like, well, how much money do you have? So it's a matter of letting them know what the cost of some of this repair work is going to be, first of all.
Yes, well, I'd like to see this board support that communication.
Will be communicated.
Okay, anything else? Nope.
Okay?
All right, we are adjourned.